Hi, guys. I'm Debbie. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. Nay, thank you for that intro. I hope I can live up to all those things. So we'll see. Um, Again, my name's Debbie. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. My story does entail drugs, so I will probably be incorporating those into this story. Um, I was born in 64, so I'm quite old. I was born in 64 in Portland, Michigan, and I have lived in Portland, Michigan my entire life. I call myself a lifer. It's a nice little town. I grew up with four older brothers. I was the only girl and the youngest. And my mom was a hard worker. She is a hard, well, she is. She'll be 90 next month. So she was a very hard worker. She put us all through Catholic school because it was near and dear to her heart, and it meant a lot for her, for us to have that background. My dad was a violent alcoholic. He he has a big part of my he is a big part of my story, for many reasons. So when I was a little kid, I always knew I was really sensitive. I loved animals, still do. I was very soft spoken, very, very shy. I would hide behind my mom's leg if I went anywhere. I was just very insecure and very shy. And I understand that now because of the violence that was going on in my home and the screaming and the shouting, and just there was so much chaos all the time. I didn't really know what to do with all of that. And I had no sense of security whatsoever in my home life. My mom did what she could, raising us five kids. My dad worked construction. Is he a carpenter? Yeah, he was a skilled trades carpenter, and he built a few things, and he was good at that. He was good. I loved my dad dearly. I knew there was something wrong with him. I didn't know what. I just knew that he yelled and he screamed a lot. And every night I would go to bed, I would hear my mom and dad downstairs just fighting. My mom, I could never hear my mom. She wouldn't say anything. And I don't want to dwell too much on my childhood, but it's just a huge impact on how my life turned out, as probably many of us in here. But there was a lot of violence, and my dad was one brother in particular, like sassed him back and stuff, and my brother um, got knocked around a lot. He got physically knocked around a lot. I don't recall any of that myself, except one time I stabbed my brother with a fork and got hit behind my head. So that's really the only time I remember any physical abuse. I don't remember verbal abuse from my father either. I was the only girl, I was his princess, and he treated me pretty good. So let's fast forward a little bit. My dad got sober when I was 12 years old. He My mom was going to leave him, and he didn't want to lose his family. So to this day, I don't know if he went into sobriety for us to save his family, or if it was more about himself doing it for himself, like I had to do it for myself. So I will never know that story. I will never know all of it. I just know that I was so incredibly proud of him for getting sober. My dream was going to come true. I was going to have a normal family. I was going to have a daddy. And one I could be proud of. I just never really knew how to feel about him, you know. And then when he got sober, I was going to be his best cheerleader. Um, I had some neighbor friends that lived across the street, and one night I went and spent the night with one of them. And the next morning, her mother pulled the curtains shut, and it was the middle of winter. It was January 29th, and we were in a terrible, terrible storm. Michigan got hit with some bad storms back then, and we were in a terrible storm. Excuse me. We were snowed in. There was snow way up over the tops of cars. It was terrible. And eventually my mom came over to my neighbor's house, and I'm thinking, what the heck here? And she took me into a room and she told me that my father had died. And he was 3 months sober. And my world turned around that day. I don't exactly know what happened. I was 12. I just know that my life changed that day, for the worse. My dreams of having a normal childhood were shot. My dreams of a dad were gone. I can remember going to school when we were younger, and there was a big elephant in the room at my house. And when I would go to school, I would feel weird, but I didn't know why. I just thought I felt different. I just felt different. And I had this big secret I was carrying around. Other people would talk about their dads, going to work and stuff. My dad was always laid off or fired because he couldn't keep a job. And I just remember feeling very different from people. So I developed myself into a chameleon of sorts. And I made sure that I fit in with whoever I was talking to so that I could have friends. And I never told anyone about my dad because I thought it was normal. I thought it was totally normal to want to throw up before you went home after school because of what you had to face at home. It didn't occur to me that other people did not live like this. So I dealt with that. And then my dad died. And I didn't know how to feel about that either, quite frankly. I cried a lot. Um, but did I miss him? I didn't. I didn't know him. How can you miss violence? So I didn't know him. Um, but something turned in my head that day, and I started lashing out more, not lashing out, but acting out. Um, my mom, my mom was relieved, I'm sure, when my dad got sober, but maybe even more relieved when he passed, because she always told me that she thought he might relapse, or she could see the struggle in him while he was trying to stay sober. And I didn't see any of that, of course, as a kid. So once he died, I started acting out. I really could have used some therapy or someone to talk to, but what I did instead was I started getting more rambunctious. My grades went downhill just terribly. I was a D-minus student at that point. I had a alcohol party at my house when I was 12 years old. None of my friends were into drinking, so I was the person that was the peer pressure. I would just say, "Oh, come on over, let's get some alcohol." I don't know where I got the alcohol at that party, but I know that it was rum. That's all I know. And I know that me and one other girl were the only ones drinking, and there was probably 7 of us. And I remember I must have got very drunk because I remember it, but I was doing some really shitty, weird things. Um, and that was the beginning of my alcoholic career. I was 12 years old in 7th grade. So let's fast forward some more. I get to 8th grade. And obviously, I must have been mourning my dad or something because my first boyfriend was when I was 13 years old. And he was the spitting image of my dad at the age. He was the same height, the same everything. And I was looking for a dad, and I got a boyfriend instead. So throughout high school, we dated. Throughout high school, I always tried to get others to go along with me and get in trouble. I would skip school. I would ask other kids if they would do it with me. Not anyone would do it, but one girl. So we would go down in the cafeteria skipping school, and we'd steal things, and we went shoplifting together. We made a list of everything we were going to shoplift. I got caught doing that. The first thing I shoplifted, I was just at a downward spiral, just getting in trouble all the time. And I just, I didn't know I couldn't find my way. I didn't have anyone. My mom was there, but she wasn't. She was too busy working. And I mean, I was the 5th child. She was probably really sick of raising kids. And she, she started going on a lot of trips and leaving us behind. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I felt very abandoned. She was going to Hawaii and Switzerland and all these other places. And I was stuck at home with my older brothers. And they weren't nice brothers. I mean, they were okay when I was little, but they were they were having their own problems. They were definitely drinking themselves, smoking weed, and they were older and into their own things, but they weren't babysitters by any means. So there was some abuse going on there, and it's definitely not their fault. They were struggling with just as much as I was at the time. So we eventually moved to town because we had lived out in the country on a 15-acre farm, little mini farm for many years. And we moved to town, and I still continued to deteriorate. And I know I was such a people pleaser because all I wanted to do was please my mom. So I tried very hard to do that. My grades were D minuses, and all she had to say was like, you should bring your grades up, and I'd do it. It was just like whatever she said, I would do. I was looking for that approval. I shopped for approval everywhere I went, through every person I met. I sought approval because I didn't have it in myself. And so I decided I need to hang out with different people maybe. And there was a time I had no friends at all. Um, I couldn't fit in, I guess, anymore. I think people were doing their own thing. I got teased at one point, kind of bullied, and it broke my heart. But I always managed to fit into another group of kids. And I graduated with a very small class of 43, so it was hard to find anybody. But I managed to fit in with different groups of kids as high school went on. And that was because I had no idea who I was. I had no idea what my purpose was. I just played the chameleon until someone said, okay, you can hang around with us. So I was a cheerleader, actually since like seventh grade or sixth grade, actually. And I think that really helped me out because I was hanging around a good bunch of girls. They're still my friends today, actually. And we had a lot of fun. And I wasn't doing drinking or drugs at that time. I was with my boyfriend, though. So my boyfriend and he was a grade older than me, but 3 years older than me. And he wasn't the best, the best of he wasn't the best person to hang out with, I found out later. But we would go out booze cruising every weekend, every Friday and Saturday. He had a car. So I was still drinking, but I was playing the chameleon at school with my friends because they were goody goodies. I mean, they were straight laced as they come, but I was still playing that chameleon. And so I started bringing my grades up, and I ended up graduating in the top 10 of the class. Like I said, it was a small class, but I ended up doing really well in school, because I had to. I felt I had to, and either that or, end up somewhere I don't want to be. So once I graduated, I stayed living with my mom for a while, and I went to a local community college, just got an associate's degree. And that was a big turning point for me too, because I had always aspired to go away to college, to get away from home, um, to go have fun. My whole agenda was to go have fun at college. It was to meet boys and it was to party, like a lot of college kids do. Um, but I was so insecure. I was so insecure. My boyfriend wasn't going anywhere for college. And I was so afraid that he would leave me or he would abandon me or whatever. I was terrified to be alone. I was terrified to grow. It was like when my dad died, all my growth just stopped. I never grew past that scared 12-year-old girl. And while I went through life, quite, I'm not going to say overly successful, but I certainly was a high functioning drunk. I just didn't have any security at all. I had to find it in other people. So I did my college thing, and I ended up marrying this boyfriend and moving in with him when I was 2019 or something. And we ended up getting married. We had 2 kids together. I lost a set of twin baby girls in between my 2 kids. And that was really devastating for me too. I was on infertility, and I went into early labor, and my little girls were born alive, but they passed. So that had a really, that did something to me too, I think. And my husband, the first husband was, he was sleeping around, and he was an alcoholic himself. I mean, go figure. I'm going to marry an alcoholic. So I ended up divorcing him after we were together. I think we were married 12 years, and I divorced him. Still not able to be alone, still not able to stand on my own 2 feet out of my own insecurities. I still didn't have it. But I was on the right track. I was on the right track when I left him. I took the 2 kids, and we had joint custody week on, week off. And I rented an apartment, and I was doing good. The kids we were so tight. It was just the 3 of us at times, and we were so tight. And life was going good. I had God in my heart. I'd always had God because of the Catholic school thing, but I had God back in my heart. When you're partying and hanging out with your boyfriend, and stuff, you don't really see God at all. I mean, I was at the age where God didn't make any difference to me anyway, because I was invincible and didn't need God. But when I was with my kids alone, I was leaning on God. It was good. It was a good life, but it was so short lived because I was still afraid to be alone. So I was dating a few people, and then I worked with a guy, and we were friends. We were really close friends, and he asked me out, and I said yeah. And that was the worst thing that I could have done for myself, not knowing it at the time, of course. So we ended up hanging out and stuff. Um, he introduced me to things that I thought I would never touch or do. I took off with it. He introduced it, and I took it, grabbed it with both hands, and just went running with it. Um, One of them was opiates. I got into Vicodin. I had never taken one, never thought about it. And I saw him take one with a drink of beer, and I thought it was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen was to have somebody take a pill with beer. So what did I do? I started doing that. I started getting into opiates. He introduced cocaine to me. What did I do? I ran with it. I started doing coke. On top of drinking. I mean, drinking is, we don't even have to mention that because that was in the picture every single day. Um, I wasn't drinking at work or anything at that point, but as soon as I got home from work, I was pouring drinks until 11 at night, passing out every night, waking up the next day to an alarm to go to work, dragging myself to work, though it didn't feel like I felt normal. I felt normal. I was hungover as hell, I'm sure, each and every day, but I didn't know that because I felt like that all the time. And on top of all of that, I was doing drugs and just anything I could pop, any pill I could pop, anything I could. I even smoked some weed in there and stuff. It was just out of control, stupid. And I'm a runner, and I was still running at that time. And I would do coke all day and then go out for a run when I got home. I cannot believe the good Lord had the good grace to keep me here. I'm just so grateful for that. I would drive in oblivion every time I went to a bar. I'd have to stay till closing time. I had to see how much I could drink in one setting, and then drive home. Of course, sometimes I had one eye shut driving home because I was so tired and so drunk. And again, by the grace of God, I did not hit anybody or kill anybody. I never got arrested for it, and I never died myself. I just don't know how. I tell myself now if I were to wake up with how I felt back then, I can't even imagine feeling that way. It was just literally dragging yourself to work. And it was every fucking day. So I did that for a long time on top of the drugs. This guy and I ended up getting married. Um, Shattered pretty much my kids' lives. We moved in together into my house that I had bought on my own with my kids. He had two kids. They all came and lived with us. And we had toxic arguments, just toxic fights. We both had the kids week on, week off. So when we didn't have the kids, everything was great. There was no stress, and all we would do is drink and gamble and party, and there was no problem at all. I mean, we were drunk buds. But when we had the kids, it just got toxic. I was a terrible stepmother. I was a terrible mom. I was a really terrible mom. My kids were young. My son was probably 5. My daughter was 9, I think, when we got married. So these were some very vital years of their lives. And I spent them using and drinking for about, I was out there for probably 10, 11 years. I'd say solid hard. And damn it, those years were during the vital stages of my kids' life. I told myself when I got sober, I would never forgive myself for that. And I'll talk about that more later on. But he ended up leaving me. Thank heavens. We were married 3 years. He left. I was mortified. It wasn't about him leaving me. It was about I still didn't know how to live alone, be alone, or live a secure life within myself. I was in my 40s by then. And I still didn't know how to do this. So after he left me, I wasn't doing coke anymore, but I was drinking heavily every day. Every day I could, still dragging myself into work, still doing coke. I got myself in $30,000 of debt by doing cash advances to feed my habits. And I got fired. from my first job. I worked for the state of Michigan. Great job. I loved my job. I got fired from that for arranging a drug deal on work hours and getting arrested after work. I got arrested for possession and didn't do any jail time because I knew the detectives that had investigated me because I worked for, let's say, law enforcement, more or less. But I thought that would be a rock bottom. You know, I was ordered on probation. I was ordered to go to AA or NA or whatever, and I went to AA. My first meeting was in, gosh, it was 2007, I believe, and it was a joke to me. It was a joke. It was like, okay, I got to do this for a year. I'm on probation. I got to do this shit. I got to do drops. I got to do everything. So I went to the meetings. I got my paper signed. I didn't grow. I started to. I would say the first few months, I was taking sobriety seriously. But after that, it was just, I was still drinking. And I could time my drinking so I wouldn't get caught with my drops. It was ridiculous in my breathalyzers. So I kept at it, got off probation, and just got harder. You know, of course, I'm free now. I can do anything I want. I was also sleeping around with a lot of men, still looking for that security inside myself. It was ugly. It was a very ugly, ugly time in my life. So this went on for another 4 years. I met husband number 3. I'm on my 3rd marriage. We're still married. Met him online. We got together. He was drinking heavily. I was drinking heavily. That's what we did. We drank together. We fought and we drank together. You know, it's toxic. I cannot be in a relationship and drink without it going toxic. You can't do it. You can't, I cannot be in a relationship and have alcohol involved at all, or it's going to go bad. And I take at least 50% blame of that because I fight when I drink. I'm, you know, not fist fight or anything, but I antagonize people when I drink, not at bars, but at home. I would get under his skin and he would get under mine, and it was toxic again. And then in 2011, I passed out one night. I was taking sleeping medication to sleep because the alcohol apparently wasn't enough to put me to sleep and keep me there. So I was sleeping, or I passed out one night upstairs in my computer room, and I just learned about the actual details of this like last week. I was talking to my husband, and I remembered it one way, and he said, no, this is really how it was. And I didn't realize that because I was blacked out all the time. But I was laying on my office, which is now my office right now, above where I'm sitting now, and I was laying on the floor, and my son came into the room apparently, and I couldn't get up. So I told him to come down and get my husband, who was down in the basement. He came down there screaming and said, Mom can't get up. She needs your help. So he came and he got me up. They brought me down. They laid me on the bed. And I guess I passed out for a while and they couldn't wake me up. So they called the ambulance. EMS came. And apparently I had woken up by then. I remember nothing of this. I don't remember anything of it. But I was sitting up. I was talking. I was laughing with the paramedics. If I had been of sound mind, I would have said, no, I'm fine, leave me here. But it wasn't my decision. And it was God's decision. It was God's decision to take me in that night because the paramedics took me over to ER. They said they weren't going to leave me there. So they took me to ER. My memory is that I woke up in ER. Apparently, I was sitting there the whole time talking with everybody. I don't recall an iota of it. So I thought I woke up in ER. And a doctor came in and he asked me what I thought. And I don't know where the hell this came from. I don't know what came over me. I don't know what kind of, I don't know what happened. But I said, I need help. I had no intentions of not drinking again that morning when I woke up. No intentions at all. I mean, I knew I was drinking a lot, but that was the extent of it. Despite people, you know, when you're an alcoholic, people can tell you all day long, hey, you're drinking too much, you're out of control. Oh, I'm fine. You know, I'm fine. I'm good. I got this. But something came over me, my God, and said I needed help. It wasn't even hard. I don't even remember my voice saying it, quite honestly. But so they were going to put me into detox right at then and there, but they didn't have a place for me. So I went back home and I could go back the next night. They could check me in. So I went home that night And just like my dad had done before he went into 2 weeks or 2 months, or I think he was in 2 weeks of rehab, I think. Just like he had done, I got shit faced to no end. I should have died that night again. When my husband took me to detox, he had to get a wheelchair in the parking lot so that I could be wheeled into ER. I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand. I blew up 0.42 that night. They stuck me in detox, and I don't remember any withdrawal symptoms, honestly, but I know I had them. And I was there for, I don't know, 3, 4 days. And then I came home and my world changed. It was in 2011. My world completely changed. I dove into AA. I remember going to my first meeting that I actually took seriously. My first few meetings in 2007 meant nothing. But I went into an AA meeting here in my hometown. There was no Zoom. I was terrified. I didn't know who I would see there. I didn't know if anyone would judge me. I mean, I didn't know a thing about AA. I didn't know people were non-judgmental. I didn't know they were loving or kind. But I walked in, and there was just a mix of people, older people, younger people, just women, men. And I just came and sat down real quietly. And someone started asking me my name. I told them my name. And I just told them I'd come from rehab and I was here because I wanted to stay sober. It meant a lot to me. And the meeting started. And I remember when I said, I'm Debbie, I'm an alcoholic. It didn't sound, the voice sounded like it was way far away. I was like in shock having to say it. I thought, oh my God, if I say this, it's true. If I actually sit here and admit this, it means I am. And I don't know if I was ready to wrap my head around that yet. So I said it, I went through the motions, I got through that meeting. People came up, talked to me, gave me phone numbers written on a scraggly piece of paper. And I just felt so relieved. I had said it. I said, my name is Debbie, I'm an alcoholic. I had said it and I could go forward. A couple days later, a couple weeks later, I went up to my mom's, and I don't know what possessed me to do this, but I had some pills on me. I wasn't trying to hurt myself at all. I just wanted a buzz. And this was shortly after I stopped drinking and got into AA, just maybe a month after. But I took a whole bunch of pills, and just to get a buzz. They weren't opiates or anything, but that night I had a seizure. I was laying in my mom's spare bedroom, and I guess I screamed out. My nephew was up there at the time, and they came running in, and I was having a seizure from all the pills. Ambulance came again. I woke up, and he asked me why I wanted to hurt myself. I said I wasn't trying to hurt myself. I just wanted to get high. And that was the extent I went, to get high. And they kept telling me I was trying to hurt myself, and I knew I wasn't. I didn't want to die. I very well could have, but I didn't want to. So I came back home. I delved into AA even deeper. I mean, I had to. I was giving myself seizures here because of stupidity. So I got back into AA. I mean, I never left. I just got home and got more committed. Found a sponsor, started doing the step work. Step one is intense, which it should be for me because I had to know thoroughly that I was an alcoholic and a drug addict too. And put my heart and soul into AA. I mean, everything was AA. I was not working at the time because I had gotten fired again. I think I lost 3 or 4 jobs over alcohol, and just not showing up. Every Monday would roll around, and I was like, I'm not coming in today. It became so. It became so second nature that another girl I worked with tried to beat me to the punch every Monday so she could call it. It was that bad. So I started my program up with a sponsor, and I had a good foundation. I was seeing a counselor who specialized. She was actually a recovering alcoholic herself. She had been sober 30 some years, and she was my counselor. So her help in AA, I was able to find God again. I had long ditched God. I mean, he was gone. Somehow he got me home safe, but that's all he was to me at the time. And I was able to get back into God, not the Catholic God I grew up with, but my own conception of God, like we offer in this program, the really cool thing, our own conception. And mine was loving because I grew up with a hating God, a punishing God. So mine was loving, of course. I needed that. I needed a strong leader, and he was a strong leader. And my spirituality just grew. I went through the steps, sponsors. I had a couple sponsors. I went through the steps. I felt I did a thorough job. I felt like I had a really good foundation, I felt good. And in the meantime, my husband was drinking heavily, and we split up. I kicked him out. I said, can't do it. He was seeing another woman, younger woman on the side. And I just said, no, you're going to mess with my sobriety. You got to leave. So he left. He had his own house over in Lansing, and he lived there. We started talking later on after he had, stopped drinking and stuff. He went to AA for a while. He's not an alcoholic like me. He's a normie, but he was digging in deep for some emotional problems. But anyway, we ended up getting back together. We lived apart for probably 8 years. Now we live together here. I mean, we have husband and wife stuff, but that's about it. Pretty good relationship, I'd say. But along the path for those 2 years that I was so deep into the program, I should have stayed, but I didn't. I ended up not having, I had a problem, to be honest with you. I had a problem because I was a Christian. I had a problem with everyone else's conception of God. If it wasn't the God I was taught in the Bible, then it wasn't okay with me. And I left the program and I went on a spiritual journey of my own, did great for a while. And then I was away from the program for probably 6 years, maybe. And almost got my sobriety date tattooed on myself because I was never, ever, ever going to relapse. I was beyond that. I threw all my AA books out, all my 12 and 12, all my work, all my stuff I had written down, all of it. I don't need it anymore. And I got in a slump in life where I had reached my spiritual goal, or so I thought. And I was getting bored with life. That's one of my triggers, is boredom. I was getting pretty bored with life, and I was getting to the point where, I was looking for something to excite me again. So I had some pills, and I started taking them more than what I had been taking. They were for back pain. They weren't opiates. But I thought I got a little buzz out of them, so I started taking them more, not more than prescribed, but more than I was taking them. And I started getting a little bit of a high from them. So I started chasing it. About a month later, I said, oh, fuck, I relapsed. I didn't even know I was relapsing. I didn't even know every day I took those that I was in full-blown relapse, because this disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful, and it lies to me. It lies to me terribly. It's the devil on my shoulder. So when I first realized it, I was just mortified with myself. It took me a couple of days of just bawling my eyes out and coming to terms with, okay, you know what you need to do. I came back into the rooms, this particular room, and terrified. I had to come in now and say that I relapsed. Now I had to come in and say, yeah, guess what? I was just shy of 12 years sober and I relapsed. And again, it felt like my first AA meeting all over again. It was just, I was terrified. Same thing that happened back when I got serious about it in 2011. I came in and I said, my name is Debbie. I'm an alcoholic and I relapsed. And nobody batted an eyelash. I expected everybody to just drop their mouths and say, oh, shame on you, but nobody did. They just looked at me and said, welcome home. Glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. And I spoke that night, and I try to speak at most of the meetings I go to because I needed to hear from you guys that night. I needed to hear you guys say that it was okay, and to tell me that I was home, and that relapse is part of recovery sometimes. I really needed to hear that. And that was 2 years ago, the first week of November. So this November, it'll be 3 years since I came into this room. And this room has gone through some changes, this particular room. But I love it, and I love you guys. And I'm probably going to be a permanent figure of this group, I pray and hope. Since coming back in, I'm working on the steps again. And well, I went through them already, but I'm working on them. And I had a revelation, when I was working on 6 and 7. It was right before 6 and 7, quite honestly. It was right before 6 and 7. I was on a meeting. Somebody said something um, to the effect of, "You're not working your program right." And I felt like it was directed, well, it was directed at me because I had shared that I didn't forgive myself for what I did to my kids. And something was said, "You're not doing your program right." And I didn't know really what it meant at the time, but I knew I had to get off the meeting. I knew I had to write. So I jumped off the meeting and I started writing. That's what I do when I'm onto something and I'm trying to figure something out in my head. And that's the way that's the way God takes me to come to a conclusion that I need to hear. So I was writing and writing and writing, and a lot of it was just jumbled messes and feelings. And I was bawling my eyes out. And that night, as I was writing, I was so depressed. I mean, I do suffer with depression. I get treated for it medically, but it was more than that. It was like gut-wrenching depression where I just didn't know if I was going to stay around or not, I just didn't want to be here unless I could come to terms with forgiving myself for what I'd done to my kids. Because I said I never would. I'll never forgive myself. But that night, after going through all of that, I looked at God and God looked at me, and I kind of just said, "Well, God, what do I do if I forgive myself? What happens then?" And it came to me that then you got to love yourself. If you let that go, if you let the kids go, you have nothing else to hate yourself for. Then that means all you got is yourself. And you have got to forgive yourself. And you can love yourself now. And I got permission that night to really love myself unconditionally. This was a very short while ago. I had been carrying it around. I do love myself, but that night something happened as a result of these steps that permitted me to truly love myself, no matter what, all my flaws, every single flaw I have. And then I worked on 6 and 7 after that, read through 6 and 7 and in the 12 and 12, and truly understood what it meant, truly understood that, yeah, there are some things I want to hold on to. I do want to hold on to feeling a little bit superior than someone else. I do want to hold on to, judging people a little bit, but I don't. And that was my turning point where I met God face to face and I just said, I don't want any of this shit anymore. You know, it, it was a good 6 and 7. And that leads me to today. And this story and my hope and my prayers that I will never walk away again from this program or from any of you or from my spirituality or from God or from continuing to grow. One thing is certain for me: if I don't continue to grow in some way or another in my life, I get bored. Boredom equals relapse for me. So I know that I have to stay vigilant on growing in this program, doing my steps, making sure I remember how bad of an alcoholic and addict I am, recalling the terrible things I went through, recalling the night I got dragged away by EMS and had no recall of it. I have to remind myself of that shit. And those are the things that are going to keep me sober. The steps are going to keep me sober. Staying in touch with these beautiful people in this room is what's going to keep me sober. And if I don't do that, man, I'm over. And I just don't know if I could accept it if I had another relapse, I'm not going to look at it that way because I'm not going to pin that on myself. Because, like the tattoo, if that had been pinned on my body and I relapsed, it would have just been worse. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'll never drink or use again because I don't know that. But I do know that I have a greater chance, a much greater chance, if I walk away from this program and everything it does for me. So with that, I think that's all I have. And I'm so grateful that you guys are here tonight. I'm so grateful for all of you every day, even though I don't come every day. I'm always here in spirit and in my heart. So thanks for hearing me and just thanks for being part of my life. You're huge. It is so important to me. Thanks.